inviting a friend with a garage to hang out, but his dad said he had to finish fixing this water tanker before he could go anywhere. Oh my goodness, is this even considered a vehicle? So many parts were rusted and deformed. The cabin was nearly destroyed. Some tires were flat or missing. We couldn't imagine this water tanker once roamed the streets proudly. We were hesitant to help, but seeing his pleading eyes made us relent. So we all decided to stay and help. First, we had to transport the truck to a spacious open area to start working on it. We used 2 super cranes to lift the battered tanker off the trailer onto the ground to begin the restoration. The tractor had finished its job and left, making room for the 50-year-old tanker. We carefully placed the tanker on the ground, lifting it like fragile glass to avoid any mishaps. Upon initial inspection, everything in the cabin was covered in rust, decay, and erosion. Nothing escaped the ravages of time. The cabin roof was almost completely severed and heavily oxidized. My friend joked that this truck was only used twice, probably during World War I and World War II. Before disassembling, he sprayed lubricant oil to make the process easier. No protective gear needed because we're pros in this field. And so, we began dismantling the truck. Piece of cake for us. With swift hammer blows, parts came off easily. Some areas required heating with a blowtorch before they could be removed. Moving to the tank area, the powder my friend was cleaning was corroded metal and years of accumulated dirt. The more we scraped, the more the oxidized outer layer came off, revealing the true condition beneath. At the front, we attached chains and used a crane to pull out the cabin. The cabin came off easily due to the corroded connections. Wait and see how we restore this cabin to its former glory. Next, onto the chassis, my friend used a blowtorch to melt and separate parts. No protective gear, but no accidents either, because we trusted each other completely. Under the cabin was the engine, the heart of the truck. It had long stopped beating, but we would revive it soon. The engine was detached from the chassis, moved with chains and cranes, and safely landed on the ground. Now, only the large, rusty, discolored water tank remained on the chassis. But it didn't pose a challenge for us. We helped each other secure the chains around the tank. With the help of our tools, we easily pulled the tank off the old chassis and placed it on a high platform for closer inspection. The bare chassis remained on the ground, so we lifted it to place a long, high wooden bench underneath. The axle was exposed with some tires missing and the remaining ones deflated and deformed. Next, we began dismantling the chassis. Each bolt was swiftly removed with the coordination of my 2 friends. What stood out was the precision of each hammer strike. My friend was a true master, hitting the target perfectly every time. On one side, a friend was disassembling the front of the chassis, while another was scrubbing the outside of the water tank. For the stubborn wheels, we used a pulley system to remove them. Each pair of wheels and axles were detached, with old oil gushing out from the wheels. The disassembly was complete, and we moved each part to different areas to have more space for restoration. We started with the chassis. My 2 friends worked in perfect harmony, removing each bolt. The working environment was dangerous, but I couldn't help but admire their strength and professionalism. Next, they drilled evenly spaced holes in the chassis, which would later be used for mounting screws or bolts. The crossbars were still firmly attached to the chassis, so my friend had to use a sledgehammer to loosen them. These huge, heavy crossbars didn't pose a challenge for my friend. He removed them decisively. Some old parts were beyond repair and had to be replaced. We used a hydraulic press to bend metal bars. The metal bar was placed on the support of the machine, already partially bent, and continued to be processed to achieve the desired shape. This step is crucial in metalworking, especially in manufacturing or repairing vehicle metal parts. This task requires precision and carefulness to ensure the metal bar is bent to the correct shape without damage, along with smooth coordination between people and machines. One friend adjusted the position of the metal bar to ensure it was correctly placed before the press started. Another friend held a part of the metal bar to prevent it from shifting during the process. Another person observed and operated the press. Do you see the small metal blocks placed inside that metal bar? They are used to support the bending process to achieve a specific angle. For this task, we had to wear protective gloves because these metal bars were very sharp and we could get cut if we weren't careful. Finally, the metalworking was done. Next, we ground the metal bars to remove rust, dirt and scratches from the surface. The angle grinder, a powerful handheld tool with a rotating grinding disc at high speed, was indispensable for this task. Moving on to the next stage, assembly. If we could dismantle it, we could certainly put it back together. This task was no challenge for us. We used a chassis fixture to ensure the chassis didn't move during assembly. After this project, we might win the Team of the Year award for our impressive teamwork, as we coordinated seamlessly while holding, fixing, and working on the chassis safely and accurately. Once done, my friend began tightening the bolts and adjusting the reinforcing crossbars securely onto the chassis. The reinforcing crossbar on a truck is crucial, ensuring stability and safety while the truck moves and carries heavy loads. We used a sledgehammer to position the cross brace between the two sides of the chassis, then bolted it in place. When assembling metal parts, a sledgehammer is always used as it helps align parts accurately to fit together. We repeated this process with the other cross braces. Then, my two friends used chisels and hammers to enlarge the holes on the chassis, since the original holes weren't big enough to fit the bolts. This job required precision and high skill to ensure the parts were securely and safely installed, contributing to the durability and effectiveness of the chassis once the assembly was complete. After securing the chassis, my friend used a spirit level to check the balance of the truck's chassis. Then, we measured, marked positions for cutting, placed new parts correctly, and finally fixed them with bolts. When attaching the bolts, we had to use a blowtorch to soften the metal bar slightly, making it easier to chisel and widen the holes. Similarly, we used the torch to soften the bolts, then hammered the ends flat to ensure the bolts were securely fastened and wouldn't come loose in the future. The chassis assembly was finally completed. On the other side, the cabin had been excellently restored and was being hoisted over to be fitted onto the chassis. The battered cabin was replaced with a sturdy, beautiful one. We could say the truck had a new head. After attaching the cabin, we hurried to assemble the wheels and axles because we were hungry, and we wanted to finish quickly to free our friend and have a big meal together. The newly inflated tires were swiftly moved and attached to the axles. Pulleys and manpower remained our trusty tools. Despite our greasy hands, we worked quickly, fitting parts and tightening bolts. The new engine was brought in, and we carefully placed it into the chassis. The work was almost done, and my friend brought out the paint cans. We proceeded to paint the chassis black, while the doors were painted yellow. A clear coat was evenly sprayed over the entire painted surface of the truck. This clear coat would protect the color paint, create a glossy finish, and increase the durability of the paint. Finally, we stepped back to admire our work and called my friend's dad to see if he was satisfied. To us, this was a spectacular transformation of a 50-year-old water tanker, like turning a frail old man into a handsome, strong young man.